drawing these I started making these drawings on graph paper and taking on sort of the full spectrum which comes out of the installations.
Right.
I just started sort of making up rules of interaction, and depending on how those rules interacted with each other and with the lines that I was drawing, patterns would emerge.
Right.
And that's sort of why I call it the game theory series, because it takes on of this idea of how patterns of behavior emerge depending on certain rules, or depending on how I don't know, like how I'm not being very clear with this.
No, that's okay.
Depending on how certain, so this comes from like behavioral sciences,
right,
and genetics and evolutionary theory,
sure,
and how depending on how certain genes interact with each other, certain things will happen, and patterns of behavior emerge. And so if you have a gene that's cooperative and one gene that's not cooperative, and then you set them loose with a set of guidelines on how they interact with each other, certain patterns emerge. And so I'm not fully fluent in game theory, to be honest, but I really love that idea of how, like, if you set up certain guidelines and you just let them play out, a pattern will emerge.
Right.
And what will that pattern look like? It's going to vary if you just change a minimal thing,
sure,
and let it reenact again. And so I really like those ideas of how patterns change, and just by combining in a different way certain things depending on different rules. So it's very arbitrary. Right. But it's just fascinating to me.
Well, I mean, but it sounds like a way that you're able to explore abstraction in a way that maybe you can't with the Plexus series.
Right.
Right. And it's sort of a process-based process-based abstraction that you wind up having the serendipity where things emerge.
Yeah.
And
correct.
There's discovery. I think I've seen some of those where I've seen drawings by you where it's done with colored pen.
Yeah,
a really fine line, which I thought when I originally saw the image, I thought it was created by some piece of technology because the lines were so precise. But I know that's not part of your practice, to my knowledge.
Well, I do so. Yeah, they started by hand.
Right.
When I had a show at the Newark Museum in New Jersey, it was a big show where I had 2 installations and some of my older work, but they also had these 3 sort of arcade niche wall where they said if I could do some sort of wallpaper or something for those spaces. And I was like, well, it would be amazing to do like game theory drawings for those pieces. They're so big that it was, and those drawings, they were just taking too much. I mean, they take a long time to make. So I was like, well, maybe, and I actually did a test. Maybe what we can do is to just scan one of those drawings, and just make it big so it can cover these 10 by 15 feet niches. And I did a test, and it just looked horrible because, like you say, when you see a drawing, the lines are like less than a centimeter long, so which is what, like less than half an inch. And when you blow it up, it just looks really messy. And so I was like, okay, no, we can't do that. So I did some tests and actually ended up doing computer drawings that we printed, and they look pretty good. And I was a little hesitant to do it because I've in a way I've been I've been very anti-technology because I really like the analog aspect of making things.
Sure.
But I was really pleased with the results, and so I actually some of those drawings I've released as prints, as digital prints.
Got it.
And they're computerized, but they're not. It's not an algorithm. It's just like the lines are actually drawn in Illustrator, and
got it.
And so, it's faster because you can group things, but it's still.
All right.
There's still sort of a by hand, sorts way, but yeah, they're computer.
But you're going to get a really clean reproduction that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see myself releasing more of those prints in the future. Right. And I would love to do like a giant, wall of that somewhere, and there haven't been any takers yet, but I've submitted that concept a few times, not a lot of times, but a couple times to do some sort of like wallpaper or mural.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. And so
actually, I would love to do wallpaper, but
so
as a design element, anyway.
Yeah, it's fine. So I think I saw where you're also working on doing a two-dimensional game theory piece using thread.
Right. Yeah.
And that I get the impression we're not ready to see, for the world to see that quite yet.
Well,
we're pretty close.
I've done a few of those throughout the years, and I've shown them. They've been in shows. So
is it like the two-dimensional? I think it was about a year ago you had a show at Conduit, which was like black and gray and silver, and in there you had some two-dimensional pieces that you with thread that were there. I remember them being around.
Yeah. No, those are. They're somewhat related in terms of a little bit of the idea of the game theory, but it's a different process. It's not, with this, the game theory thread pieces. They're really like cross stitching on steroids because it's like a 4 layers or it just. And they overlap, the stitches overlap, and so it's very meticulous. They're very small, usually. They're about 6 by 6 inches.
Okay.
I can't really make those bigger because it exponentially increases the time.
Right. No. Right.
So,
but it sounds like it's probably one of the most portable parts of your practice. So it's like something that you can do on a plane, or
exactly. It's something I can take with me and work, and which is the reason I started doing them in the first place. When I was doing them like by hand with ink, then they became big drawings, like 30 inches. Square drawings, and then it's not that linear. Like I think very early on I started doing them with thread. It's just that they take so much time that I don't like. Perhaps one of the ideas I'm thinking of is just starting to make those, for several years and just keep them until I have a good number that I can actually do a show of just that. And so I think that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And because I think I would be really interesting to have them all together.
Absolutely.
In a space. And but yeah, and I love doing those pieces, and it's really it's really exciting when I'm actually about to finish one, which is I'm really literally I probably will finish today, and it's just like it's. I started obsessing and just working a lot on that, and I should be doing other things, but instead I'm doing that. Right. Because, I have emails to reply, and I have a lot of a long to-do list, but, I can't help myself.
Yeah. So tell me about your time in Toledo playing with glass.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. It was very intimidating because
it's so foreign. It's its own thing.
Yeah,
right?
And I had a show in Toledo that opened end of 2016, October of 2016, and I spent like a couple days before my installation with the museum crew. Like the workshop, the glass crew, sort of toying around with a couple of ideas and just sort of getting a little bit acquainted with the thread and not with the thread, with the material, with the glass.
Right.
But it was like, it was very intimidating because it's like. Well, as a material, it's just really scary because it's at thousands of degrees. I don't remember how many, but it's just really, really hot. And you're not necessarily, you don't know exactly what you can touch or not. You don't know what you're going to be. Mm-hmm. You can't get too comfortable in a space like that because you don't know when you're going to touch a hot rod and become a hot mess. It's just really taking me out of my comfort zone because I had never done something like that. Right. So, that's what also made it exciting. But I was also thinking oh my gosh, these guys who are master glass workers are going to think I'm an idiot trying to come up with these stupid ideas. But it's funny.
Did it turn out like you wanted in the end?
Well, no, it really completely broke my expectations in terms of, it completely blew me away. It was, it was just really, it became very exciting when because it was just I spent 10 days there, and the first day and a half or maybe 2 days, it was a lot about these ideas I had in my mind about what it would do and how they were not actually really quite working.
Okay.
But then sort of taking what was happening and sort of running with it and just making it work. Right. And the crew was fantastic, and they were incredible to work with. They did all the work really. They were just pointing, things do this and do that. Right. And I just had a great time. I had a great bond with those guys, and we worked 10 days straight, and it's really hot. It gets it's very primal in a way, the process, and it's one of those things that you're very in the moment because the material forces you to sort of be present to what's going on, especially for the guys that are actually doing the work.
Like a high wire act.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure exactly how that has